Thank you. First of all, I'm here replacing the Director General, and he's apologizing for that. He had another issue to handle, so asking me to come here. Happy to be here in Milan. We should be the best place to have EMA in Europe. Hopefully, the story is not closed, but okay. I had this topic that yes, I would have preferred to have the other relation that Jorge made, but sustainability of cancer care. This is a nightmare, of course, and even because, of course, as was said before, that there is a change ongoing. Already or not, the science landscape is changing, and the question is, are regulators as GDA payers ready? The simple answer is probably not, but we are trying to do so. This is quite complicated because the innovation has impact on health and welfare that is not easily or to capture. There is a short-term benefit, a long-term benefit, and on the other hand, we have to cope with sustainability and costs, and this is also something that is not easily predictable when whether a new treatment can have even a good impact in indirect costs. On the other hand, there are other costs, and so it's quite complicated. This is not something that is also only in Italy, but it's, I would say, everywhere. We have heard about Jorge, about the EMA. There we are trying to do a good job. We're trying to use in the best way the tools we have and the legislative tools we have, conditional, accelerated. That's the tools we have to speed the access. And then we are working on possibly having the scientific guidelines and the approach of the CHMP always stick with the scientific progress, but there is always a gap. And probably one of the most important move that was made is about the prime. Prime means that not proactively, but based on the request of the company, if there are products that can be game changer in a situation where there is an unmet need, the CHMP rapporteur is appointed very early in the process, so that then when it comes to the assessment procedure at the time of approval, this could be an accelerated assessment, and then you have the opportunity to guide the company and to exchange views and to even to push them to interact with HTAs, which is another issue, very important that we addressed later on in this presentation. But the good thing here is that this is centralized procedure. There is one decision that is for all Europe. When it comes to price and reimbursement activities, you see that here Mr. Price is desperate because it's a completely different story. It's completely different story even with regard to the issues that payers must face. Of course, there is a problem with sustainability. There is a problem with absolute longer life expectancy and increased prevalence of non-communicable disease, including cancer, and the higher use of medicine. And there is also public budget constraint that request that people on the payers and SCA must make some decision on how to allocate the money they have, and this raise competition among different therapeutic areas, even when you're dealing with curative versus palliative treatment. This is an issue. Coming to the example of anti-cancer, fortunately we have longer cancer-related survival, more treatment are available, and since they are more effective, they are administered longer, and there are an increase in the new agents combination, and so this is And then, last but not least, there is an increase in the drug price that you observed in the years. This is usually justified by high attrition rate of clinical development, regulatory requirements, and the need to reinvest in research and development. These prices are set globally and arrive here in the country, and then you try to bargain and usually they are not based on the level of evidence and the type of studies that are supporting the approval. And just to you see here, the average cost for an entire cycle of cancer therapy, it was 3,000 in 20 years ago, and is now something like 70,000 to 100,000 projection for 2018, and not talking about the CAR T cells, which you know the price is one-shot therapy is around this 500,000 euros. So this is a not negligible issue. And then, of course, there are uncertainties about how this drug will do in the real life. And when it comes to put money to give the drugs to patients, this is of course a problem. There is a need to balance the timely drug access with the risk of underperformance and lower than expected cost benefit. This is a problem that is not only Europe. Accelerated approval from FDA of expensive drug, then insurers must decide whether or not to pay for them. And in this paper published on New England, those decisions are becoming increasingly complex in light of the rising prices of the new drugs. This is a problem. And there are a lot of just two, but there are a lot of paper trying to address the how to define the right price, and of course sometimes you don't have strong evidence based on strong endpoint overall survival, and even sometimes in quality of life that is meaningful for patients. And so, and somebody is questioning whether the high cost of the drugs is really justified by the money invested in development. But this was the gap between the regulator approach and the clinical practice was well captured in this paper from the ORTC. The title was Mind the Gap. And it's true, there is a gap. There are a lot of questions that are not addressed and not needed to be addressed in the regulatory approval, that instead are needed to be addressed when it comes to reimbursed drug. How is the new treatment compared to clinical practice standard of care? This is something that we do not always know. What are the clinical outcomes when used in real life patients? How to combine sequence. Usually there is poor attention on the treatment pathway when there is a clinical development. Perhaps any company is doing its job very well, but is doing its job for a drug, and they design the study not to address the issue of the optimal treatment pathway. They decide to target an indication, they decide, but sometimes there are much interesting questions that are very interesting from the payer's perspective that are not addressed. Another issue is, what is the optimal duration? Usually we do not know. Perhaps in a trial there is the patient could go for, say, 2 years. I'm thinking about the PD-1 inhibitors. Then we do not know how many patients have been treated for there. What do we know if you stop and then retreat? It would be better. It's a question that we do not know. And then, so we are going to pay for something that we simply do not know. Patient preference, long-term efficacy and safety. Of course, best patients are treated, not all patients representative of real life, and the follow-up sometimes is rather limited, and we do have uncertainties on long-term efficacy and safety. So there are a lot of questions, and this, when I read this paper, I found that they pictured the challenges that we are facing when we handle the decision of reimbursed drug at the national level. So this is a problem of the absolute benefit paradigm versus the relative effectiveness, and this is the gap. This is the gap between the regulatory decision and the reimbursement decision. And if you can imagine that it is difficult to have a regulatory approval, you can imagine that when it comes to reimburse, it would be even tougher. So here we have again Mr. Price, and the other problem on top of the one I mentioned here is that governments act individually, differently from what is with regard to the regulatory decision that is one in Europe. When it comes to reimbursement, anyone is going its own way. It's a mess. And perhaps this is not Mr. Price, this is Mr. Patient, because despite centralized regulatory approval, this is unequal access to innovation and disparities in overall survival across Europe for cancer patients. There is a proposal that was published a few days ago from the Commission that personally I fully support, that go in the direction of having one common HTA evaluation across Europe. This is very important. The objectives, of course, the first and the main is to improve the availability of innovative health technologies for EU patients, promote convergence in HTA tools, procedures, and methodology, reduce duplication of efforts for HT bodies, also for industry, and ensure the use of joint outputs in member states. This is the very first stage, and we do not know how it will end, because then it is a political decision. But I hope that it could help in going in a direction in which things are made a little bit easier. We had a workshop that we organized as the Oncology Working Party. I'm the vice chair of the Oncology Working Party, and I fully pushed to have this workshop in EMA on side histology independent indication, because this is the true topic. This is where we have to go. But, and we put together academia, industry, and HTAs also were involved, patient representatives, and to have a fair discussion, and where the discussion was from the non-clinical part to the clinical evidence. We have Richard Simon, a statistician, that gives some very interesting presentation on the various topics. But now here I talk about this because I'm trying to tell you that there was the HTA also there. The HTA, they performed a survey on what is the feeling of HTA about umbrella basket trial and the use of this trial for approval and reimbursement. And of course the reaction from the various HTA bodies that were surveyed was, okay, everybody acknowledged that the biomarker-driven basket umbrella trial allow a faster and more efficient drug development. They allow to answer multiple research questions in parallel, limit exposure to patients to ineffective drugs, and reach and potential for higher activity. This is something that is easily acceptable. When it comes to would you reimburse the challenges, methodology issues, multiplicity, potential or chance findings due to small basket, or for instance, thinking about histology independence, histology very poorly represented. There you should have strong non-clinical data supporting that, perhaps some data about what is to contextualize the historical data or something that, because it is acknowledge that you cannot ask sometimes, very often in this case, for comparative trials. And even though the position of everybody is, but this is also for the EMA side, that if it is possible to have it at least in empowered control study, this is more than welcome. It is Richard Simon made a presentation say that suggesting a confirmatory trial in histology independent indication using a control arm that is the best chemotherapy or the best treatment for each of the single tumor if you reach to make some homogeneity. So that there is something that must be done, and but it's very hard for the people that is going to reimburse. accepting an histology-independent indication. So the discussion is open, which is good. We prompted the discussion. We are happy to have done that, and but it is just the start. But it's not something that is arriving in 2030, 2040. It's something that is arriving 2019, 2020. So everybody must be aware of that. It's something that is there. So I can skip that. The concept here is early interaction, not only with regulators, but also with HTA, and great efforts in building knowledge when it comes to basket umbrella trial, not just on the activity of the drug, but also on mechanism of resistance, comprehensive collection of historical data in biomarker positive, quality of life, non-clinical part. There is something that must be a strong package if you want to go for an histology independent indication. Not say that it is not possible, but if it is, it should be done in a very good way. Coming to the IFA, how IFA evolved to target the challenges in cancer sustainability. Perhaps this is I try to capture on the slide the main point, the main move we made. One is the scientific advice. Scientific advice, early interaction, early formal interaction with the companies to support the development to advise. What we really support is to have this in the context of parallel HTA, UNETA, EMA approach, because there is a discussion that must be placed and done with everybody. But there is was published the experience. IFA participated very strongly on that since 2010 with this parallel advice. This is just an analysis that I ran on this slide, but just to show that the analysis was made on how were the uptake of regulatory and HTA recommendation from the companies when they came to have this parallel advice. So you can imagine that there is a room on one side of the table. There are regulators and the various HTA. On the other side of the table, there is the company. And there are questions on, we are discussing questions on the comparator or on the endpoints, which are probably very meaningful in this. And as you can see in this slide, what emerges here, that there is a difference in what was the comparator that was acceptable for the regulators, but was not acceptable for HTAs, or for some of the HTAs. And you can see here that the companies had a different approach. Sometimes followed the regulators, sometimes followed the HTAs, or sometimes followed some HTAs. The consequence of that, of course, will be at the time in which they will come in that country to support the reimbursement of the product. So this is an attempt to being all on this time, or this part of the table all together, is an attempt to align on what would be. Because if science is strange, that the comparator is good for you and not for me. The same is for the endpoint. For the endpoint, you see, it was a little bit easier, because perhaps on the endpoint there was more agreement between the regulators and the HTA. But this is an issue. This is an issue because it's strange that if science is science, the positions are so different. But we have seen that the problem is the starting point. Another things that IFA is trying to do, was created an innovation office and an horizon scanning office. The aim is, of course, there are a lot of new trends from artificial intelligence to nanotechnology to advanced therapy, something that is perhaps starting in spin-off from academia or small medium enterprise, and our aim is to capture at the national level all this good, because this is important for us to learn what's happening in our country, what are the news. On the other hand, sometimes we're seeing that academia has an approach that is far from the regulatory need. So an early interaction, which is informal here, which is just to, is important to perhaps to align and to drive and to push this new very good reality towards the European context, European regulatory process. So this is something that we are going to do, which is we just started now, and we will have interaction with the academia for sure, and we had also an interaction with the farm industry and small industry. They have this. Then, with regard to access to innovation, what I want to say here is a good move that was done. A good move that was done is the decree of 7 September 2017. This is the decree, the ministerial decree on the compassionate use. Here we did a great move that tried to go towards personalized medicine, because until now it was only possible to request a drug for compassionate use if they were available phase 2 data in that specific indication. Now, if you have a rare tumor which is expressing a biomarker, you can request the drug for compassionate use. This is go in the direction of precision medicine. It's a small move perhaps, but not that small, because it was hard to arrive there. There was a lot of discussion, but I'm happy to say that we reached to do that. And then there are the other tools that we use to have early access, because the access is from the clinical trials to reimbursement. That is important that here in Italy we have a strong researchers that attract a lot of clinical research. This is something that has been shown several times. I guess it is all the various managed entry agreements that are used in Italy, and of course you can go from the refusal to the application of reimbursement without any condition, or a financial scheme, performance-based, or various types. All instruments try to handle the uncertainty, the high cost of the drugs, and sometimes they are more valuable, sometimes not. We have learned a lot of lessons, and but here it is what we are doing. Registries are essential to this, and but we try to change a little bit, close many of them because they were open since a lot of time, and try to simplify, because you should decide, and finally it seems that we are able to do that. We want to simplify. What is the aim of the registry? Because if the aim is the outcome is one thing, but if the aim is just to have a good use or apply the managed entry agreements, it must be simple. So it's something that we are trying to do, and a discussion with the scientific committee, but perhaps we hope to move in a direction to simplify. This is what we would like to do. This is the number of patients that are in AIFA registries over time. This is something that now they are going to be analyzed, and the analysis will be shared and published. And this is ongoing in these 22 registries that are being closed in these months. So it is an evidence generation during all the life cycle. This is the life cycle approach that we're trying to apply. The last important move that was done from the Italian government is to create these funds for innovative medicines, one for innovative, another specific for oncological drugs, in total 1 billion euros per year, which is very, very important. And this is for innovative medicine that are defined based on this multidimensional approach: medical need, therapeutic added value, and quality of the evidence based on the grade. Of course, the grade is not easily applicable for the situation of rare tumors when a controlled trial is clearly unfeasible, so due consideration is given to this particular situation. So I stop here. Have you heard that it's very complicated, and we we try to have an ethical approach, social responsibility, and also economic sustainability of the system, which is ethical, because if you don't have sustainability, you cannot ensure the proper treatment to the patients. New regulatory approaches are ongoing. We are trying to move the field. New pharmaceutical governance, I showed. So I guess that we have to all work together, and I hope that the best is yet to come.